Well, good evening, everybody, to another episode in Careers in History. My name is Volker Janssen. I'm professor of history at Cal State Fullerton. Tonight, we will be talking about careers in publishing and editing. And for that, we have invited four guests that will have partly alumni from CSUF and work across the United States. We have an admittedly small live audience tonight, but that should not keep this conversation from, I think, being useful and lively and enriching for all our students, whether you are listening right now or whether you're listening later on. As you know, this is part of our attempt to connect you to the purpose of your studies, to reaffirm your commitment to history, and to strengthen your understanding of the way in which history can be useful beyond the academic discipline, beyond the teaching profession, and in a variety of different careers. So let me first make sure that you can all hear me. If you can hear me, just enter a quick yes in the chat box at the bottom. I see Matt, Michael are doing that right now. Thank you very much. Vince, I hope you can hear us too. I want to remind all of you, and that is true for those who join later, that whenever you have a question, feel free to enter that in the chat box down there, and I will make sure that I check that box and ask our participants the question that you pose. So let me now tell you a little bit about how we will move forward tonight. I will first introduce you to the panel members, who will then tell us about their job, their careers, and how they got to the job they have now from college. They will talk about their work environment, their typical work activities, and then we'll discuss the ways in which their history BA or history MA or other degree prepared them for the job. They will share some lessons and some advice for you, and in the end will be available for your questions. So let's move to the panel that we have tonight. And I want to really thank the first three here for being willing to participate absolutely for free at midnight their time, because Kate McLean, Brandon Proyer, and Chris Hillier all work on the East Coast and are now up at midnight to talk to you until approximately 1:30 in the morning. And they all have, as you know, which is why they're here, jobs to go to. So kudos to all of them for volunteering to do this just for you guys. So on the very left we have Kate McLean, who is an editor and content developer at Cengage Wadsworth in Boston. To her right is Brandon Proyer, who is editor at the University of North Carolina Press in Chapel Hill. And to his right is Chris Hillier, who works at WW Norton in New York. And then to the right, and I'm sorry, Ken Leong, I forgot to add your publisher name. That is my oversight. Ken Leong, do you want to say where you work?
Sure. I work at Living Stream Ministry based in Anaheim, California.
And I want to invite all four of you to just tell me a little bit about your work. Clearly, there is something that attracted you to publishing, but how great is your job really? What really do you do? Kate, do you want to start?
Sure. So just to give some background, I'll start from my current job. So it's actually changed a lot in the last few years, just with the pace of technology change. So you can see that already with my job title. So I used to be called a media editor or a development editor, and now I'm a senior content developer. So one of the things that I enjoy most about my job is sort of this exciting change we're in the middle of. So getting to create history content, but really looking at how we create these online products and this online content that really is the future of what our history books are. you know, when I started in publishing, it was more what you think of writing and editing, but it's really becoming an area where educational background in the content area of history is going to be hugely important. More and more, it's really it's great to have the publishing background, maybe of people having done masters in publishing or understanding writing and editing, but having this content focus and understanding of the content area is going to become more and more important. So, so that's what I enjoy, the fast pace of it. It's very creative, and we're getting more into that technology.
Now, Brandon,
Yes.
it would seem that your job is maybe more traditional along the lines of the editor position that we imagine. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm pretty much as old-fashioned as you can get. And we will, I think we'll go through how we got to this job in a little bit, but a taster of that is before I worked in this job, I worked at trade publishers in New York for several years. I came down to North Carolina to kind of bring a little bit of the trade strategy and approach to, and that is to say trade as in facing a broader audience, to, you know, a very traditional academic, largely monograph publisher. So what I do at UNC Press is I both publish, you know, I do say very academic work at times, revised dissertations, books that are sometimes for courses, but are sometimes solely speaking, you know, one academic to another, well, hopefully more than one, and that move the field forward, but also bringing crossover works, bringing trade works, and sort of trying to sort of bring some trade know-how to showing historians how to speak to a broader audience and make their ideas as palatable as possible. So that's what I do at UNC, mostly working in African American history, Southern history, environmental history, and political history more broadly too.
Chris, you're at W.W. Norton. How would you describe your job there?
Well, so at Norton, I'm an assistant editor for media in the history department. And mainly right now, it's we work on a lot of instructor materials that follow the textbook. But similar to what Kate is kind of doing at Cengage, we're taking things a little bit more to the 21st century. So that involves you know, editing and creating content, you know, such as online quizzing or other ancillary materials like Blackboard packages. And so we get to work a lot with some authors that may not be on the front of the main textbook, but they still drive the content in a really useful way, and it's interesting to be kind of on the forefront of history where, you know, we're working towards making it more accessible through giving teachers the tools that they need to kind of, you know, reach a wider audience of students.
So all three of you are specifically working in the field of history. Kate and Chris working in the textbook industry, and Brandon working in academic publishing. Ken Leong, your publishing is entirely different. Tell us about what you do.
Yes, what I do is a little bit not so much in the mainstream. Basically, I work for a nonprofit, faith-based publisher, a Christian publisher here in Anaheim. And what I work on are two journals. One is my main work, which is a ministry journal, and by that I mean it is a spoken message that I turn into a readable form, into a monthly issue. And then the second journal that I work on or contribute to is a more academic journal. And for me, that my portion there is a little bit smaller. I contribute more of book reviews, but that is more academically geared. Whereas the first one, my main job is to turn ministry spoken messages into readable, publishable form.
Hmm. I could imagine that your work environment is much more akin to a small business, whereas Cengage, Norton are sort of the big brothers in publishing. I don't want to call you big brothers. That sounds too mean. Maybe big sisters. Maybe that's a little friendlier. Um, and UNC Press is maybe the I'm running out of
We're the
metaphors
old
for
warlords.
siblings. Okay,
Yeah.
good. There you go. Thank you. um, and I'm sure you'll have a little more to tell us about how it is to work with a really small publisher. But what I want to hear from you now is, what would you say is really the best thing about your job, and what is the worst of it? Kate, do you want to start?
Ooh. Oh, I get to start again. Let me think. Ooh. Okay, I want to start with the best and not with the worst. So, one of the things I really like the best is that I'm in the content area of history that I'm interested in. And because I'm also working slowly on a master's degree at the same time, I really enjoy that what I'm studying syncs up with my work. So, trying to think like a student and then also create content for students is interesting because it's in a content area that that I feel more engaged with. So that's one thing I like. Another thing that I think is really cool is that when I first got into the field, I wasn't in technology, but we're trying to be like in that online sphere now, and I think what's interesting is that's really changing in history. Like reading is really important, but how do we do that? How do we design an online course so that students can enjoyably read there, but then the assessment and content that used to be considered ancillary is now really important, like the quizzing that Chris mentioned is something that we do need to look at just as closely because everyone's using it. So I'm enjoying sort of the interaction between just learning about new technologies all the time and trying to problem solve. It's like maybe the quizzing platform is going to change. Like, how are we going to adjust to that? But we do still have some places like with online readers, like primary source readers. We're trying to think differently about how we actually can still create those. Like maybe permissions costs are high and we can't necessarily do those in print anymore, but we might be able to create them online. So that's my favorite part. My least favorite part is probably just trying to adjust to the pace of change. So one thing we've heard recently is that in technology you don't have a 5-year plan. You might have like the 6-month plan, and then you replan again for the next 6 months. And I think that's actually is sort of like how that shift is working. We used to think of maybe a whole product, but now we sort of might want to build a sample and see, do students like this? Would they use it? Would they, and then build from there and try to fix things. And so it's sort of like learning how to work in that fast-paced environment is, when maybe you really love writing and editing, you can still do that sometimes, but other times you're more of a project manager.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm going to skip you, Brandon, if you don't mind, and ask whether that is the same for Chris. Do you feel the same? Are those the strengths and weaknesses, or maybe is that the appeal and the stress of the job? What Kate described?
Well, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with what Kate was saying about just the exponential growth and how quickly things are starting to move along. I haven't been with Norton or in publishing for a very long time, but it is interesting just to see the way that it's changing, and I think that with that, I do enjoy working on coming up with these new ways to introduce history to a huge group of students. But, that also does come along with some growing pains where some of our mechanisms are not in place or they change fairly rapidly. And it's just a matter of, having our processes update as quickly as we can.
Mm-hmm. Now, Brandon doesn't have to stress about disruptive technological innovation.
That's
what's
right.
The best and the worst, what's the best and the worst about your job?
Well, so the two prongs of my job are I acquire books and I edit them. And, those are the best parts of my job because, networking with people, going to conferences, refining ideas, and then, actually adding value to people's historical work by making it more legible to a larger audience. That's when and then best of all, when we publish it, it actually works. That's the best part of my job. If there's a downside to my job, it's that we're facing a world with limited resources, and as you say, project management is trying to manage complexity and trying to decide what thing to throw my resources at, and always second guessing oneself and deciding whether or not one is choosing correctly. But I mean, it's mainly the downside of my job is just I always wonder if we could be doing more of this or that. But in terms of the basics of my job is the best version of my job that I could hope for. It's a good job. I recommend it.
I noticed that none of you said the criticism that comes in editing. Now, this may not be so central for Kate and Chris, where you don't send something back to an author and say, look, what you write is, what's the technical word, bullshit.
I do have to do that sometimes, actually.
Okay.
Because we do.
Is that hard for you? Go ahead. Is that difficult?
Oh, I was wondering if Brandon was going to take that first.
You're talking about rejection. I don't find rejection difficult. It was initially difficult when I had to reject everything when I was working for other people and being the designated rejecter. But I often it's a good thing to reject things. And many books shouldn't be published. And you're doing people a favor if you can honestly tell them this is never going to happen. And it can save them quite a few steps if you tell them that directly, rather than saying, oh, maybe if you do this or that and talk to somebody else and you're somebody else's problem. So, although certainly I do bounce things to, my assistant to reject at times. If something's completely plumb ridiculous, which is pretty frequent. Rejecting something by somebody I respect is not the hardest thing in the world because, if they're intellectually honest with themselves, then they'll see that, we're not coming from a crazy place.
I can jump in and add there. So I was just thinking that at Cengage there's a role that's similar that was called the acquisitions editor role, and now it's called a product manager. But sometimes, books are being rejected. Sometimes when I've worked on books as a development editor, the content has been rejected because perhaps it's new authors, but maybe their scholarship isn't up to date, or it's actually a reason to do with the content. But sometimes the content's good, but we can't publish it because the permissions are going to be too high, and other reasons. But I just want to add a little plug for a role that I don't have, but there's a role at Cengage called like a digital content designer, and that person usually has either a master's or a PhD in the field in history. I don't want to get off track here, but they're bringing their expertise. Sometimes they have teaching experience too, and they bring that in. So a lot of the collaboration in determining, will this product work is between the product manager, who's kind of like the ACED who's driving the business decision, which seems a little bit like what Brandon does, and then having other voices such as the role that I'm in of being like a content developer or development editor traditionally would be the name, and then this other role of a person who's perhaps has teaching experience or has been more deeply ingrained in the discipline. So I just wanted to emphasize that I think one of the positive parts of the direction we've gone in is in the field or in my company is there's definitely a collaboration behind, you know, maybe why certain things are rejected or not.
Yeah, yeah. Before I move on to Kin Leong, who has a very different story to tell us, I'm sure, I want to follow up with Kate and Chris, because I have worked with colleagues of Kate's at Cengage in the past. I have worked with Chris in the past. And Brandon, I hope Rob Chase's collection of essays is still somewhere on your desk.
It is indeed.
Yes.
Yes.
Chris and Kate, do you think you will stay in the field of history? Because I know that I've worked with many people who have moved from their position into other fields. When it comes to textbook publishing, can you be confident that you will stay there, or will you at some point need to do, I don't know, economics or do some other field entirely?
Chris, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess for me that's kind of a loaded question. You know, I'm fairly early on in my career, and although I do really love history and the thought of, you know, going on to either another editorial branch of Norton or, you know, wherever that may be, or maybe a job in the production department or manuscript editing, you know, I think that it all depends on what the best, you know, way up the ladder will be in the future. And, you know, I would love to stay in the history department. I really do enjoy it, but I think that eventually it may be more of a professional decision than kind of, you know, one that my heart will lead. So
yeah, there's only a certain number of positions, really, probably in your company and in mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Within the discipline.
Kin Leong, let me ask you, what's the best part about your job? What's the worst?
Well, for me, the reason why I came to this was just because of my love of books, of reading. So you know, like Chris, more like Brandon, I am more of the, you know, pen and paper, the more traditional discipline of editing, working, being a wordsmith, and trying to get the, you know, sharpen the writer's utterances. And for me, just being around this environment is the favorite part of my job. Of course, the nature of my company, which is a nonprofit, and it's faith-based, and so it's deeply personal for me. So just being in this environment, doing, you know, what is deeply meaningful to me, is definitely the biggest plus of my job. It's hard for me to pinpoint a negative. I think for me, if there's any negative, it's just that, you know, I could always be better. I could improve myself, you know, be better at what I do, and that's a constant learning endeavor.
All right. Well, let's hear a little bit more about how you got into the positions that you're in right now, and because Kate shouldn't always have to start.
Thank you. Just kidding.
I'm going to move to Brandon, because you actually did not graduate with a history degree.
That's right. I sort of mess up this whole thing because I came to history basically through publishing. Should I go down the numbered list, or should I just...
Please, whatever you want to tell us.
Okay, well, so I had no idea what major I was going to be when I was an undergrad at UNC. I knew I wanted to be a writer, which is what, in fact, I did not end up being. And I ended up thinking that the best way to go about doing that was English and creative writing, and presumed that I would go immediately from that into being a novelist, and then reality intruded. I moved to New York, had to get a job somewhere. Got an internship at a magazine called Cabinet Magazine that was doing a book with basic books called Presidential Doodles. And they needed somebody to go around and find doodles by the presidents. So I, for some very tiny pittance every day, I would like get on buses and go to libraries and look at microfiche and find doodles. So a little taste of actual historical research. And I found I really liked it. But even better, because there is always a kind of careerist angle to this, I met the editor of the book, who was Laura Heimer at Basic Books. Through her, I ended up being able to finagle a job as a marketing assistant at Basic. And through benefiting from turmoil, from the financial crisis, from all kinds of job moves that people were making at that time in publishing, I was able to rise up and really realized that even though I thought that I really wanted to do or even edit fiction, that history was actually what I really kind of loved. And I came into it through, very broad narrative history, and then found out as I kept going and as I kept doing more and more serious books that the more serious they were, the more I liked them. And then arriving at UNC ended up being the kind of perfect the perfect match of the level of seriousness in terms of like actual historians doing real history and me being able to actually add some value based on my experience at the trades.
So that's really remarkable because right now you have a pretty significant position in that you can determine someone's publishing future with UNC.
That's right.
Which is often the difference between making tenure as an assistant professor and not making tenure.
Yes.
And
it seems dangerous to give someone of my qualifications that amount of power.
I trust you, but you must have read an incredible amount of history to feel comfortable with that position.
That's right. Yeah, there was a moment when I kind of so in between Basic and UNC, I was a politics editor doing sort of kind of current events books at this publisher, Public Affairs. When I moved over to UNC, pretty much for the first year, I was reading, master's comp sort of like lists in the disciplines that I was trying to acquire in, because I realized I really was not equipped yet to understand the historiographies that were going to be crucial not only to me but to my authors. So yeah, I spent the first couple of years, and I still, I am looking at taking some classes on the side at UNC as well, because it's crucial that I not be ignorant about that. But we fortunately have advisors who can tell me what to do. So.
Yeah, and I know a lot of your colleagues in other academic presses. I know Susan Ferber at Oxford University Press. She has this, very compelling story. I think she published that in Perspectives, the AHA magazine, where she talked about the disappointment of not landing a tenure-track job, but ultimately ending up in this very similar to yours position at Oxford. Which is in many ways any historian's dream. Reading history, editing history, talking about history, meeting other historians at conferences. You really are living the Cal State Fullerton motto, which is lifelong learning. That's clearly what you need to do.
Yeah, no, it's the realization that I had was I really loved history because I liked, well, first of all, it was a way to be able to talk about politics with people without, them thinking that I was a blowhard. But also just having smart conversations with smart people every day. And, my situation and Susan's are reversed because I never thought that I wanted to do academic history for the first, 5 years of this. But I came into it, and once I realized it, I was pretty gung-ho about it.
Yeah. Chris, you said a couple of times that you haven't really been in the job for all that long, but how did you get into it?
Well, so I finished my master's.
You are a history major, right?
Yeah. I did my bachelor's in general history with a minor in cultural anthropology at Montclair State University in New Jersey. And then I went straight through and did my master's in comparative world history at Rutgers Newark, which is their northern Jersey campus. And so as I went into the second year of my master's program, I had finished most of my credits, for the master's, and I kind of decided halfway through or so that I wasn't really interested in pursuing a doctorate, um, which was kind of off the beaten track for my small graduating class where everyone in December of that year was polishing their writing samples and getting letters ready and everything. But so I kind of just I reached out to my network of friends, a lot of whom were in majors outside of history, and they were familiar with creating a resume or writing a cover letter. And I started to apply to some internships, and I ended up one of my good friends from Montclair State is still a photo permissions editor at Norton, and through him I was able to meet the manager of the photo permissions department and kind of fell into an internship there. And I never really considered publishing before that. I never thought about it. I kind of juggled with the idea of going back for another year and getting a teaching certificate and trying to get a job at a charter school around here or something. And it just so happened that I guess it was maybe early May of 2014, right before I walked at graduation, the editorial assistant position opened up at the media department at Norton. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and I started June, a few weeks right after I graduated.
That's very lucky.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it was.
reserved. I don't want to dismiss your accomplishment, but it's. I mean, that is good timing to say the least.
Yeah, no, definitely, and luck, did have a lot to play with it, and very, very lucky to have fallen right into, my something that I really am interested in and enjoy so much. Yeah.
I will also say that, not necessarily just being in the right place is important, but being in the place at times matters. I mean, we heard this in Brandon's story that he got to meet people that could make decisions at Basic Books. You had the chance to take an internship, and it seems to me that publishing still is a very, very much an East Coast concentrated industry. Do you think that's correct? Anybody?
I was just going to say, I mean, academic presses I think I think Brandon could speak to that better, but I would say for higher ed or educational textbooks, I would say that there is still the bulk of it in, I think, Boston and New York. I don't know if other folks want to jump in here.
Well, so Brandon,
I can talk. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I will say that when I would often hire interns at Basic, and I would feel very bad if I was hiring someone and their address wasn't in the area, because I knew that I was asking someone to uproot their life and come live in New York for no money at all, and.
Yeah.
And so that was partly, that magnetism of New York. A lot of the jobs are there, and a lot of the jobs are on the East Coast. But I wouldn't, I also wouldn't underestimate the value of a university press and the sort of local publishing operations that are in a lot of places. So there are pockets everywhere, and some of those are translatable to New York or to other centers. And some of them are actual legitimate career options. But yeah, there is a big pull to New York if you can make it there.
And, it is.
It's possible even to work remotely. I just wanted to jump in and say, I just wanted to jump in and say that I think it's important when you're in school to try to be open to different types of opportunities. You know, for me, I mean, to speak about my background a little bit, I worked in a few different fields, but I kept ending up back in history-related jobs. So I think you don't always come out of school and maybe the first job that you have in publishing isn't in a content area you're interested in, but you can then sometimes move from there
Tell
into
us
your
how you
discipline.
got into your job.
Oh, so I'm trying to think if I should go back to college or not, but like Brandon, I was interested in creative writing. I think I originally majored in English and film studies, but I had a work study job that fell through at because I didn't have work study anymore. So I was working at the alumni magazine. I ended up at the university archives. So that was sort of accidentally falling into history studying. But when I graduated college, I actually had a seasonal internship out at the Tlac Historic Site in California. And when I got back to Boston, I actually had a job at a nonprofit, and then I ended up, a friend of mine actually was like, oh, why don't you look at publishing? And I did a publishing graduate certificate. And I also volunteered, so I think that's always, you know, a good way trying to look for opportunities. I found a volunteer opportunity with Book Builders of Boston at the time. And through that, I found a marketing assistant role that was in economics and finance. And then I worked on computing books. And then eventually there was an opening in the editorial group, and I started working on political science. And then I had headphones on and I didn't have the sound on, and I heard that someone was leaving the history media editor position, and I was able to apply for that right away. But one of the things that I found out is that in that role, we really have been involved in doing a lot of cool stuff with like history media and maps and stuff, so that almost brings me back to my original interest in film. So mine was a very circuitous route, but I find that it keeps bringing me back to history-related jobs.
Kin Leong, how did you get into your job?
Like Kate, it wasn't direct either. I've always been interested in history and in publication, but my parents would have loved that I could have been an accountant or a management consultant in college. So I actually graduated an undergrad in economics first. But then I decided, to also attend a Bible school to follow my heart in doing that. And I did that for 2 years down here in Anaheim, in fact. And I found out after that there was an opportunity to work in publications, to work in publishing related to what I had been studying. And so, it's a small outfit here, and but they like me, and so it was a good fit, and I really was passionate about the subject, and so that's how I started on it. And in fact, it was through this job that I got into history back again, although I thought at the beginning it wasn't as practical as a career. But now I had the opportunity to go back into history, and for the first time I actually got to study history and in my master's. So they kind of all came together kind of later in life, so to speak.
And I think there's a lot to learn here for those who are listening now, and for those who will listen to the recording later, about how all your stories can apply to others. That whether it's history or something else that you are strongly passionate about and that you believe in, which is your case, Ken Leong. If you are sufficiently committed to something, it's the right idea to pursue that. Whether this is, in your case, religion, or whether it is another passion. In publishing, there are so many ways in which you can sort of apply your interest whether it's history or something else. The other thing I think that's really important is, and that comes through all stories, is the willingness to make these personal connections. Now, the four of us, the four students who are listening tonight, of course, can't all easily pack their bags and go to New York or Boston and pick up an internship. And I know, actually from personal experience, that it's really costly to do an internship in New York. 20 years ago, I moved to New York to do an internship with a very small newspaper that couldn't pay me anything. And I worked, I think, 60 hours a week for 3 months for absolutely no money. To work and worked as an editorial assistant and editor. But to be able to put that time in, put that money in, and make that sacrifice, there's no guarantee, but it can pay off either directly or indirectly in really significant ways. I want to move on now to your different work environments. You've all already talked a little bit about the people that you work with. How common is it in your field to have a history degree? I guess
I can start with that.
Okay, yes, please. There you go.
So at Cengage, actually, there's one of the two product managers on our team has a history degree, a history master's, and then we have at least several content developers with a history degrees, either MA or bachelor's, and then each of our work teams has this digital content designer role, where that role is hired because they have both the history, content background, and teaching experience. So I think that in this line of work, I think that having that background is certainly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add one quick note, which is that, well, actually, I'll save that because it's question 3.
Oh. Well, you can jump ahead. That's okay. We're not so strict.
I was just going to say one of the things that I'm learning as our industry is changing is just that in addition to having that content background and a strong facility with writing and editing, I'm seeing that it's also helpful to try to develop some formal project management skills and also increase your comfort level with technology, even if it just means getting used to the terminology, or if there's so many online courses now, Coursera, there's Ed2Go, different places where you can learn more to understand just like how online products are built. And I really think in a lot of ways this is the direction we'll be moving in. So understanding how technology works and being able to pair that with the content background is going to be crucial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even if you are not particularly fond of walking around with your iPhone in front of your face at all times, even if you are averse to reading a book on a screen, understanding the different technological developments to determine which one has probable lasting power and which one will likely not make it. I think that's, for that reason alone, I think it's important to stay abreast of what's happening. Chris, are you surrounded by historians, or are you the history nerd in your group?
Well, for our history department, it's we're fairly small. I think that there's 6 of us altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 of us do have degrees in history. Only the only other one with a master's degree is the senior editor, and but the rest have bachelors. And then the other 2, they have my editor Laura has a master's in creative writing, I believe, and English,
Mm-hmm.
and the associate editor for the print side has a bachelor's in English.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not the only history nerd, luckily. But I am always surprised to hear how many people in other departments, whether it's production or manuscripting or elsewhere within the company, who also have a bachelor's in history, but just somehow ended up in their current department.
Oh, okay. So even outside the field of history, there are other history degrees working at Norton.
Yeah, it's always surprising where they pop up.
Well, Brandon, maybe for you the question is the other way around. Are you the only non-historian?
Well, it's a little more complicated. Well, let me see where to start. A lot of people have higher degrees and have done graduate work, but not necessarily all in history. Partly because I am one of two history editors. I believe Chuck Grench got a history bachelor's, although I don't believe he did. I believe actually he got an MFA in poetry, but this was in the '60s. So. So that gives you a little sense of the generational difference. However, a lot of the people who acquire in different fields have a degree in that field. The religious studies editor has a PhD in religious studies. The sociology editor got a master's in sociology. The American studies editorial director is ABD in American studies. Moreover, we kind of increase, and I think this is true of a lot of academic presses, a lot of university presses. We see ourselves as kind of an alt-ac, an alt-academic place where we benefit from people who understand academia. And so a lot of the people who come up and in the sort of junior editorial kind of cadre have MFAs, they have masters, and increasingly that's kind of an expectation. So I am indeed a bit of a barbarian in that I don't have anything other than a bachelor's. Although there are others like me. Ken Wissaker at Duke University Press doesn't even have a bachelor's, and he's editorial director there.
Wow.
So there are outliers out there, but in the university press world, it's very high, graduate degree friendly.
Now you said you're kind of the working as an editor in the more traditional sense. And yet, are there things outside your writing and reading skills that you have to develop routinely on the job?
Now, let's see. This is gesturing in the direction of tech.
Yes, possibly.
I would say that we are extremely thrilled anytime somebody comes to the press that has knowledge of how all of these disruptive technologies work. We are very eager to learn about this sort of thing. That said, the core of my work is pretty traditional bookmaking. And I would say that the stuff outside of acquisitions and actual editing that I do that's the most sort of offbeat is trying to kind of build more intangible connections with writers and editors and book reviewers and kind of public intellectual types to try to do work on my author's behalf. So so it's kind of more traditional editorial sort of stuff that I do at the end of the day. However, at any time I have someone working with me, like an assistant or someone on the junior side who is good at the tech things, then it's only good.
Well, I will say that you handled the headset very well, and so clearly you have a knack for it too.
Well, Brandon could also, Brandon, I'm assuming you also benefit from skills like public speaking. I'm trying to think of other things that I find I use Excel a ton more than I did not look into using that much in undergrad. I was, using all Office and Word.
And that reminds me, of course, the numbers aspect of the job cannot be neglected, because even though I didn't get into publishing thinking that I would have to do any math, lo and behold, it's actually really important that I know how to read a budget and a profitability and loss form, and to be able to talk the talk when it comes to contractual terms and royalties. Believe it or not, that all really matters. So
Yeah.
so yeah, there's a lot of things beyond just the pure, ivory tower, red pen, and manuscript.
Yeah, I think you all.
I also wanted
all
to.
have-
Oh,
you all have sort of
oh, sorry.
a professional core to your daily job routine that involves sort of the basic tools of, I would say, the modern white collar work environment. Knowing how to handle a budget, um, um, speaking effectively to to your team or to an audience. I think all of these things are sort of part of everybody's work routine. Um, certainly for you four. But Kate, you want to say something?
I just wanted to jump in and echo what Chris had mentioned about that there are history majors, I think, throughout publishing, and I think humanities majors like English and history in these areas are sometimes, undergrads, especially here, you have to major in business, and I think that humanities skills are highly valued in this field, like being able to write and communicate. And I just wanted to emphasize that that's also true at Cengage.
Yeah.
Lots of humanities majors.
Actually, yes. And you'll be surprised that even in our outfit, there are a lot of history majors. Some may be start out in engineering or in English, but when they started on their masters or even their PhD, they turned to history. Even in work environment, I mean, in the subject matter that we deal with, which is theology for the most part, still there's a great parallel between the study of theology with history. The skills that are needed are parallel very well, and so you find in the place that I work, we have most of the editors, actually all the editors, either have a master's or a PhD, or they're working on it.
Yeah, I guess that you all need the ability to tell a good story, or at least tell a story. And I think history prepares you well for that. So well, Ken Leong, I'm glad that you are not the history nerd outsider in your outfit then.
No, most definitely not.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to show you a little bit more detail here, because these are the goals of the BA and the goals of the MA for our department. This is what we give our students and say, this is what you need to be able to do at the end of your degree. And I wanted to see whether you have thoughts on which of these you think are really, really crucial for your line of work, and which of these, might need some revision on our part.
I looked at that earlier, and I noticed that in the MA goals, the writing wasn't underscored in point 3, but it is in the BA goals. I guess it's because the writing is in number 2 of the MA goals. Am I correct?
Yes. The other possibility is that I accidentally cut number 3 in half.
Oh, okay.
That would be a very
Because for us, that is key. Of course, the content of what we write and edit is a little bit different from just strictly history, but the way you present cogent arguments, the way you phrase certain things, is very much ties in with what we get in either undergrad or a master's in history.
Any other thoughts here?
I would just jump in and echo what I'm totally going to mispronounce her name. What Ken Leong is saying. And it's middle of the night. That's great. I think that these are actually the argument approach. I mean, I'm not naturally like a speaker, but I think being able to determine what your argument is really crucial. For people that are product managers on our team, they're trying to go on campus and connect with both instructors and students and really understand how we can meet their needs. So like how we can build a product that's going to work for students and instructors. So understanding the discipline is crucial, but also being able to understand and be able to communicate very well and persuasively at times is very important.
I think
But having in history is
I think
I was just
Brandon, for you, all of these are, sort of part of your daily routine, right?
Who was that question directed to?
For you, Brandon, I suppose that all of these
Yeah.
are part of your daily routine.
If I were to distill down what like the core elements of the job of history editor at a university press are, it's being able to develop an argument, being able to find the audience for that argument, and being able to pitch it to connect the one and the two. If you can do those three things, then you can do any job in publishing. And all of this is, if you can do all of these things, then you can do those things. So for sure, these goals would certainly prepare you for the work that you would be doing here.
Yeah. I wonder whether for some of you these goals are not sufficient. Maybe there's, can you think of, something
I'm
else
just
that really
thinking,
needs to be here in your industry?
well, I'm just thinking about the aspect we were talking about, some of the things that keep coming up in my position. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that they should be part of the BA goals or the master's goals in this particular, like within history, but as far as like broad educational goals, what I hear about a lot is wanting to understand learning design, being able to sort of interact in that environment in terms of like project management style abilities, which are, I think, a lot of editors have those informally, but we don't use like the formal like project management, like the PMP certification type of terms aren't generally used, but those skills are highly valued, both being able to have the sense of, how learning design, I actually can't define this, but I think it's the, the combination of like understanding how people learn, and that's really crucial when you're creating content online, is to understand how will this be used by students, how will they understand the content. So it's like we need all of these traditional sort of goals are really important to our understanding what to put in the product, but we also have to be effective about how we deliver that content. What the student's going to experience as they're using a product, as more books go online, like just understanding just sort of the flow of products is important. So I think those are areas that I wouldn't change these goals, but just understanding that students will need to develop project management goals, skills and things like that.
Yeah. And I guess the point you made is that it's not enough just to know, but to continue to understand what it means to learn. I think for Chris, for you, that's also important, right? That you constantly have to think about how do students learn.
Yeah, definitely. And, a little bit more with my department, we are, mainly focused on giving teachers and professors the tools so that they can foster and, achieve these goals within their own departments. And I think that it's hugely important, because there are so many different things out there in publishing and, really in any field where it's a little more flashy rather than substantive. And, it's kind of trying to weed our way through that and not, not go along with something, I guess, that has a little bit more longevity and will truly be effective and is, most importantly, what the market wants, what our teachers are going to use, or something that's maybe going to give, what we're producing our edge, or, and also that is tailored to the type of book that we're working on. So yeah, I mean, with my job, I guess specifically working on a lot of instructor materials, yeah, we kind of are trying to just help the teachers mainly, and then but also support the textbooks in a way that is really effective in the classroom.
Mhm, mhm. Now, I know that the 4 students that are listening tonight, and I think a large number of students that will be listening later on, have at one point or another participated in the creation of the History Journal at Cal State Fullerton, which has been um, a #1 award-winning journal of MA granting institutions for many years now. The students that are listening right now, they can specify the award that the Willoughby Eaton Journal has received, and they are starting to type right now. So all of them have learned how to handle a journal and how to sort of manage something of a project. I wonder whether for these students who, are already sort of trying their hands on editing and the work of publishing something, what kind of advice can you give them? What kind of lessons have you learned that they could really benefit from?
Maybe I'll start since I'm aware and familiar with the Willoughby Eaton.
Yeah.
I think for those who are really interested in doing publishing, you should really strive to write as much as possible. Writing helps with editing and vice versa, and that really that was what I pushed for in my master's. I really aimed, one core focus I had was to improve my writing, and I used a journal like the Willoughby Eaton to focus my efforts to gain something, and I think I did win one award one year, but definitely keep writing, keep reading. Actually, this is universal when it comes to I think most writers who are well-published writers, be it creative fiction writers or nonfiction, I think they spend a lot of time reading too. So that the reading improves on your writing, and that in turn helps with the editing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Any other lessons or advice to share?
Well, so this is Brandon.
Yeah.
I guess I'll weigh in with something that's a little, well, since my experience is a little less historical in terms of my training, this is a little more careerist necessarily. But the thing that I found from my origin mythical story, and from talking to a lot of people who have made their way through publishing and have come into publishing from academic situations, is connect with people. Always be connecting with people. And sort of, if you want to get into publishing and you have an academic advisor who has published some academic books, it isn't a bad thing to see if they know anybody in publishing who might be willing to talk to you for an informational interview or something like that. Like, people in publishing really want publishing to stay alive. And we're really happy when people want to talk to us and ask us like how we made it in publishing. And those conversations are helpful, but they're also, future recommendations or future people who might be able to help you down the line. Mm-hmm. So I would say, connect genuinely with people. You don't, necessarily just want to like throw out every single name that you can possibly throw out, but But use your connections, and you may have more connections to the publishing world than you think.
Yeah. You know,
I agree with Brandon.
Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Oh, I was just going to say that I agree with Brandon on that front. And one note that I would say is when you get into a company, that's also more opportunities to, network with people in other departments. Say, say you don't understand something, you can, go reach out to a person with a more technical job and learn more about that. But I also just wanted to quickly add a piece of general advice, which is I think that it's also good to think carefully and choose the steps that make sense for you, because sometimes in this field especially, it may not always be like a straight move from this position to the next position. You might zigzag around a little bit, so the informational interviewing will help with that, finding the right areas to move to get more expertise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Chris, any lessons or advice you want to give?
Yeah, I definitely agree with, what everyone has said so far. I kind of felt that, one thing that really helped me, because I only got into the job market, in the spring of 2014, was really to reach out to people that I had either known, friends of friends, or some of my closer friends who had nothing to do with history. I think that in the variety of people that you meet in college, who are studying things from landscape architecture to, something involving sustainability, or even, business majors, I think that it's important to speak with those people to kind of bounce ideas off of them, because, more often than not, they have great advice as to the way you should write a resume, or the way that you should present yourself in an interview. I think that those types of skills, which are a little more leaning towards the professional rather than the academic, I think that those really will help any type of student kind of succeed in, not just getting a job in publishing, but you know, taking what you've learned through your history bachelor's or master's, or whatever subject that you studied, and kind of learning how to put your best foot forward, which I think isn't always something that comes through as well in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And but is very, very beneficial, throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah. I also have the impression that all of you somehow began began work while you were still studying. I think maybe not with Chris, maybe it wasn't the case for you, but it seemed that Kate, you certainly started working while you were still a student.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I think that I completed I completed a master's in publishing while working in publishing, and then now I'm working on a degree in history, a master's degree in history while working, and I think that part of the reason I'm doing that, it might be a little crazy since I also have a baby, is that it keeps you in that perspective too, like in terms of I'm working in educational publishing, and I think it helps me understand what's going on, but it also, I think, broadens your skill set. I think the way that the market works now, it's like you want to develop your related skills, so I felt like it's really useful to have a content expertise, but then also try to be developing the skills that follow in with your interests. Like if you're, have a design interest or something, that may fit in a way that you can't foresee now with your publishing background or your history background. So I think part of, continuing to be in school and work is thinking about how these pieces may fit together in the future, and you don't even realize it now.
Yeah. I was thinking of possible employers on the West Coast here for our students. And I thought, of course, Cengage, Norton, McGraw-Hill, Pearson, they're all on the East Coast. But we also see a growing number of sort of these startup interlopers that are really conceived as tech businesses that see the online world as a market opportunity and specifically hone in on education. I'm thinking, for example, of Global Lyceum. Global Lyceum, which is founded by I think 2 professors from Cal State San Jose, and they have a business model that's based on a technology platform, but they absolutely need history editors. Top Hat Monocle is a similar outfit, and I get emails from other sort of learning platform companies. What's the other one that's coming out of Texas? Oh, Rice University is launching it. It's escaping me right now. But there are a couple of these where for you guys, the students, you're looking for opportunities to sort of try your hands on something. They may look like tech companies on the outside, but actually education companies on the inside, and they need someone who knows the field of history, who knows how to write, because they have the platform, and now they need someone who can handle writing and content responsibly. And then there are of course academic publishers here on the West Coast as well.
I'm sorry, my experience is East Coast centric, but I have noticed, I just wanted to add, I've noticed a lot of ed tech sort of companies that are cropping up here in Boston as well. So it's interesting to see, like you're saying, I think they're going to need people with content expertise too.
Yeah, OpenStax is the other one I was thinking of. That one's out of Texas. Adam Matthew Digital is another one. I don't know where they are based actually, but the point is that if you look around and maybe even ask faculty, do you know of any publishers or tech platforms that focus on education? That might be a way to sort of identify the market or identify the job market around you in your area.
There might also, I just wanted to jump in and say there's other types of, it might be there's other libraries or other types of historical sites or museums that may have publishing related functions too.
The Huntington Library is an example, yes. Okay, well, I think this is the time where we want to see what questions you guys have. Matt, Michael, Vince.
It looks like Michael has a question on here about opinions on self-publishing.
Self-publishing. Well, this is clearly less a question about working in publishing, but getting published. Well, we can still take the question, I think.
You could take it either way, though, because I'm thinking one element of having a resume now is that people are interested in seeing if someone has a website, that their own website, maybe is a step beyond something like LinkedIn, where you can pull your interests together. So, if you're applying for a history editor job and you had a site where you were keeping a blog or keeping something that's focused narrowly on history or something like that, that could benefit your career too. But you're right, the main part of the question is self-publishing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Matt has a question that we're waiting for. Kevin, I see you there. If you have a question, feel free to write that down. Okay. Yes, and I do want to underline something that you all said, that when it comes to networking, it's not enough just to sort of put your name out there and sort of, figuratively wave at people saying, hello, I'm here, but to have something to offer to sort of productively network with people. I think often students misunderstand networking as sort of just constantly showing your face. And that's not really a productive way. It's not a way in which you make people think, oh yes, that person would be someone to work with. Okay, now we're waiting for a couple of questions. No need to over-edit questions, guys. Okay, that is one long question. Let's see. Matt, first off, thank you for all the information and advice. My main query relates to getting my foot in the door. Listening to the stories tonight, networking obviously comes across as crucial, but it still seems like there's a bit of contingency involved. Granted, I served as editor-in-chief for the Wilabethan and also edited for Dr. Haddad's contemporary Iraqi studies journal in my work as a GA. But I'm curious if any of you have recommendations for taking the next step. Matt, you are close to graduation, but not yet done, right? So you want to stay in the area. Well, do you guys have any recommendations? Is there something like a central resource where one can find basically the publishers, their locations, like a trade yellow pages?
Oh, there's bookjobs.com used to be a place where I would look for things, and for university press listings, the AAUP website has a job board and that sort of thing. But in terms of listing locations, there's such variety that you kind of have to look in your area.
LinkedIn might be a good place. LinkedIn to just kind of, search out who might be working in what areas and maybe reading some background on them, and it would also be a way to reach out.
Mm-hmm. The Huntington Library has a very small publishing outfit, but they might have ideas. So that might be a place you can turn to.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that for working and publishing along, every single kind of publishing experience is pretty fungible. Like, we can make anything work. If you've worked at a library, if you've worked, on a journal, if you, worked for an agency, or even, on the production side or in the copy editing side or the manuscript editorial side for like an editorial services place, all of those things are relevant. It sort of just depends on what makes sense for you at the time that you do it. And I certainly had to do a lot of very crappy jobs on the way in between internships and finally getting a job I actually wanted. But I think just be broad in terms of what you're willing to do within reason, but also, creative in terms of spinning the jobs that you've done or the experience that you have on your cover letter or your resume as you apply for things. And we'll go along with it.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Kate.
Oh, I just was seeing a question on here about the future of the industry, and it's changing drastically, and there are big companies that are trying to be more careful and sort of determine what direction we're investing in. But I think that that having great content is going to continue to matter. I think it's just a question of, it is sort of a tough market in terms of, if, just being, I think, just echoing what Brandon said about considering publishing functions in a broad range of ways, and learning and developing skills are part of it. And I'm just thinking about the fact that it is hard to get into, and I think that's where looking for opportunities to develop your skills and make connections. You can even do informational interviewing by emailing people sometimes if you don't want to bother them by calling them. I'm just thinking that I think we do continue to need good content. The issue is it is a very competitive market right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and Vince, I don't know whether you worked in the news business, where of course print went down majorly, and a lot of jobs were lost there. the kind of jobs that Kate and Chris have are the jobs that actually are created by the digital turn, or in many ways become more important because of the digital turn. So while there are a lot of jobs that disappeared, you wouldn't want to be the print editor for Newsweek when it went all digital. There were a lot of other positions that became available where you needed to combine writing skills with digital skills. That seems to be that's the impression that I'm getting here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in terms of like if you develop some of these skills that fit in. So it's you have strong content expertise is in our field becoming increasingly important. We may rely less on external authors, but having content experts in our company is increasing in value. So sometimes it's good to deepen your expertise in an area, but then also finding skills that you think are going to make your resume stronger.
Vince explains that he was in marketing and sales. Brandon, yes?
Well, I was just going to sort of try to bridge both questions. I don't feel as though the job industry is the job/industry is shrinking necessarily. For university presses, obviously, we're not growing as long as our institutions are not sinking additional monies into us. But we're not shrinking. And to be honest, the sort of nonprofit world is looking at all of the tech disruptors and thinking, well, we kind of need to step in and do some things as well. So there's actually like a lot of stuff going on. And I'll just say broadly in just looking at North Carolina, because North Carolina is local to me, I see more and more kind of upstart small publishers cropping up, doing literary fiction or local things, or having some sort of connection to like a creative writing program or anything like that. And I do think that there's actually more diversity in terms of these smaller sort of outfits going on locally, mainly because as consolidation happens in New York, there's just a lot of stuff that still needs to get published. So between the proliferation of the tech world, between projects short-term or long-term that are created by grants and by nonprofit world, and small upstart things, I actually think that there's a lot out there. You just have to you kind of have to have your eyes open, and you've got to talk to people that have their eye on that sort of thing. So, yeah. And
Brandon, what you mentioned earlier about how you tell the story is like picking up what the transferable skills were, and sort of making it fit into a story about just the decisions you made as you've gone along.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin has a question. Had a question earlier where he asked whether writing for a company, and I guess you mean for a publisher, is similar to the process of conducting historical research or cross-referencing sources. Trying to understand the question here. I guess you mean whether editing still requires historical research and cross-referencing of sources. Brandon, do you ever track down your authors and see whether they are fabricating things?
Check their footnotes. It's not a good situation when I have to. I'll say that this is what the good thing about working at a university press. This is what reader reviews are for, in part. But no, I don't do that work personally. However, I do have a good bullshit detector.
Okay.
Though usually I won't get too deep in a project before it becomes necessary.
I was going to say from my perspective at Cengage that as we're creating more online content, so sometimes it's like interactive maps. They need a content story, or maybe it's essay content. We're creating a lot of content for the online products that goes beyond traditional authoring. So we actually do have a need that's sort of filled by our digital content designer will write a sample, and maybe we'll have an instructor, subject matter expert actually do that work, usually a contractor. But just wanting to say that basically all of this online interactive content that we create needs to have good content in it, like maybe we're analyzing maps or it's new types of assessment, and that does require historical skills, and sometimes it might just be determining a sample or creating the concept behind it, but it will still employ some of the things you focused on in school.
And by the way, Matt, regarding jobs in editing, I just did something really stupid and went to Google and put in publisher Los Angeles, and you know, the number of businesses that are listed in exactly the kind of different types of publishing that Brandon was talking about: creative, fiction writing, nonfiction. I mean, there is just so much out there. That, of course, would be cold calling. You know, if you have to start somewhere, that's one way to start. If any of your previous, you know, editing jobs get you somewhere else, that's another avenue. But there's certainly a lot there. It's just not always the big company, the big operation on Madison Avenue. And I know people say Mad Ave, but I don't.
I have a friend who Googled a job in London, and Googled, you know, museum or permissions related jobs, and she ended up working at the British Museum. So
Google does something.
From a Google search.
Okay. It would be unseemly just to cold call these publishing companies. No, what are they going to do?
I don't think that's the case. It's just hard to reach a person sometimes. Like LinkedIn might help you get more specific names of maybe a hiring manager in your area. This sounds a bit cold, but sometimes you really want to find the hiring manager because, you know, HR might be just inundated with so many different applicants. So trying to get as close as you can to the person who might potentially make the decision about hiring you for a job is good if you can use LinkedIn for that. I don't think it's seen negatively to cold call. I just think sometimes it's hard to get through to HR departments and such.
Yeah, I think cold calling the right people with the right pitch is the key, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you can identify the person who has your dream job and write them a nice email saying, "I know you don't know me, but I'd love to know how you do what you do," then that's a flattering email to get, and I want to help people who write me an email like that. So,
yeah,
I wouldn't consider it unseemly if I got an email out of the blue from someone asking for an informational interview. I'd kind of vet them a little bit, but.
And look,
yeah.
I mean, Matt, you have experience. I mean, you've done a good amount of editing, you've done a good amount of writing, so it's not like you're walking in from the street and said, "I want to be general manager." You know, it's not unreasonable for you to recommend yourself.
Michael asked about travel. I mean, I think there's definitely travel on the side of the acquisitions editor / we call them product managers at Cengage, but you know, sort of like within our content groups, there's usually some folks who want to focus more on the content, and then there's some folks who want to be more sort of the vision, sort of the business person who sort of runs that team. And if you're on more of the business side, then you tend to travel more. That's a generalization, but you know, a traditional acquisitions editor or a product manager will be visiting campuses around the country, so there's definitely some travel there.
Yeah, I go to about 10 cities usually per year, kind of randomly because my list is very U.S. focused. This doesn't really usually involve any international travel, but you know, I go to Toronto sometimes because there's often conferences there. I was in Little Rock this past weekend, not exactly the most glamorous place to be, but So it's sometimes second-tier cities, but it is, interesting to travel around and on the company dime. So, yeah, there's a strong travel component to acquisitions.
Okay. Well, those are all really good questions. Thank you. I'm not getting any new questions in, and it is now 1:30 in the morning for the. So, Kate, your 9-month-old will probably be up in 2 hours. So, so
You'll be up at 6 o'clock. Hopefully not any earlier.
that's not too bad. And so you have a whole 4 hours of sleep. I want to thank all of you. Kate, thank you so much for coming into this at very short notice. Brandon, what a fantastic, different perspective from an academic press. Chris, it's so good to hear what it's like to be fresh in the business as you are, and I think that's something that really is important for students, that they don't just get the wisdom of people who've done this for 30 years. And Kin Leong, to have a local experience outside of history and something that you're passionate about. I think that's a really great combination. And I hope that a lot of people will listen to this down the road. Matt, Michael, Vince, Kevin, spread the word about these webinars. Tell people that this is useful to do and listen to. So I'm going to thank you all. I wish you a good night. And we'll be back in February with a new webinar on, believe it or not, I think it is historians and government, and we have plenty of those.
And Volker, will you share the recording as well?
Absolutely, yes. I will send you all the recording link.
I might be taking. It's just really interesting to listen to and enjoying hearing everyone's perspectives.
The recording is available for anyone who has.
Good luck to everybody.
All right. So good night, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thanks
Good
a lot,
luck
guys.
to everyone with their career search.